All right, so we're kind of going into a couple of sections on how how we're going to how the body adapts to specific types of exercise. So we're going to do like anaerobic today, and I think we do aerobic on Monday, Wednesday. Today's Wednesday, Monday, Tuesday, because we don't have class tomorrow with the community service day. Highly encourage you to go to community service day and do something. You get a free shirt out of it, and if you go with a really good group, they stop for food on the way home. Like you just got to make sure you know what group you're going with. So I prefer to go with like the EMS group. They tend to do something fun when they finish. So like whatever Matt Russell's doing, that's where I would go personally. I will not be able to go anywhere because I will have the baby in the morning. But I will at least be in the gym supporting everybody until they leave. So make sure you're doing something fun tomorrow. All right, so there's what we're going to be going over today. So biggest question is, who can benefit from resistance training? Can women? Yeah. Big question has always been, should children be doing weight training or not? That's always been a question. There used to be a thing like women were afraid like if they lift too much, they're going to start looking like a man. That's what they used. That was an old like 30, 40 year ago argument. Women will actually so what I have on here is women can actually gain more pound for pound muscle than men, because men start usually at a heavier weight, and so to add more muscle, but compared to like a female, they're usually a little bit lighter weight, and when they start weight training, they're going to gain muscle faster, at least in proportion to their actual body size. There are definitely collegiate coaches who believe that females shouldn't be lifting weights. Hopefully most of those are retiring and going past. Another one for kids is, will lifting weights stunt your growth? I remember hearing that one as a kid, as they were worried if you were like heavily lifting weights, it would hurt your growth plate and stunt your growth. Probably not, but we'll get into that as we go. So just a couple of things to pay attention to as we go through this one. See, I can already do this one. Women should not train. They will look like a man. You should not weight train before puberty. Old people should not weight train. They might break something like a hip. What do you think?
You can break a hip not doing weight training.
Exactly. Probably. I don't think it's going to make that much difference. If anything, it's going to at least make it less of a chance. But there is a little bit to be said in there about weight training for old people. You just have to be more careful with them. Like if you're the exercise professional training someone, I'd probably have them doing more things on a machine than free weights, because it has more control over it, less things that could go wrong. They're not going to drop the weight on their foot and then because if an older person drops a weight on their foot, their bones could be more fragile. Yeah, we'll get it. I think I have more details on that as we go here. So resistance training, your substantial gains actually are at the beginning, are going to be neuromuscular. So it's not actually going to be hypertrophy, which is your muscles growing bigger. So like I pretty much designed my weight training class with all these principles in mind. So the first 3 weeks of weight training class, we do one set of 25. This week we just changed to 2 sets of 10. 2 sets of 10 to 15. And most of the strength gains that people are going to have in a 10-week class are going to be neuromuscular, meaning I'm going to start lifting more weights. Like on my bench press, I start out doing, let's say, most people are going to do about 70 pounds. I'm just throwing a number out there. And at the end of 10 weeks, they're going to be probably somewhere in the 90 to 100 pound range, is what the kind of the average would be. But none of them pretty much are gaining, they're not like, their chest isn't getting massive in 10 weeks. What's actually happening is your muscle is actually recruiting more fibers, because they're not used to having to deal with this much power. or having to use this much strength to do something like, oh, well, that was painful or that was tough. I should probably see if I can recruit some more friends, more muscle fibers to help strengthen that. And that muscular change is what is going to happen most often. So, but after you're about 3 to 6 months of training, you're going to be able to get, so that would be, the class is 10 weeks. So 25 to 100% strength gain. I was pretty close there, huh? When I said 70 to 100. So I was pretty close. I was just going off of what I remember seeing. And 100% means that they could probably double their strength. So that is possible. Better force production, ability to produce, they call it true maximum movement, which means using all their muscle fibers instead of just some of them, because they've never had to. Similar strength gains as percentage of initial strength. So, but greater absolute gains happen for young men than for women, older men, and children. And that's due to the incredible muscle plasticity. So men can gain more after 6 months than women can, and that's mostly due to testosterone. Sorry. So the mechanism for these strength gains, so as your muscle strength goes up, size goes up, muscle strength goes up. The opposite for atrophy, that's the easiest way to think of it, hypertrophy and atrophy. Most of us have heard of atrophy, like when an astronaut goes up into space, their legs atrophy because they're not using them. They're not going against gravity for so long. And so their leg muscles don't work. So the longer somebody's in the space station up there that they have, the International Space Station, when they come back and they get out of the space capsule that's in the ocean, they have to carry them because their legs aren't working anymore. And there have been some pretty interesting studies where they would put a weight belt on, or a belt on them with rubber bands basically to a treadmill to try to keep the atrophy from happening in their legs. So can you imagine being in zero gravity and having something like electric or having an elastic,
right?
huh?
They can walk after though, like eventually.
Eventually, yeah, it doesn't take long, but if you're up there for 6 weeks to 6 months, you're gonna get some atrophy in those legs because you're not using them for anything. So, but it's actually a little more complex than just like as muscle goes up, strength. So strength, or the source of the muscle gains, is a muscle size is the one we normally think of, but the one we don't usually think of is the altered neurological control, which is recruiting more weights. So this is the snatch. This would be the world record for a snatch by weight. So how heavy the person is, the higher their one goes. So here's just what that motion is. We don't do this nearly enough. It actually takes a little while to train a client to be able to do this. Especially because you don't want them to whack their head on the bar. So notice that a 50-pound woman does about a 100-pound snatch, which is this motion. And it's about the same proportion here. So the world record for women in the weight class of 75 is 150. The world record for the 105-pound men's is 210. So it's not quite double is what they're doing there. Same thing for the cling and jerk. Again, it's by weight class here. And the world record weight by each of those classes. And this is also the same list you'll see like in the Olympics. So this would be like powerlifting for the Olympics kind of thing there. Let's see, this would be through 2016. I'm actually curious. I do have, so this is chapter 11. Let's see. Do we have updated charts for this, I wonder? Nope, that's a bummer. Oh, maybe. Oh, maybe. We do have new ones. So this would be the cling and jerk, it says. So say we were at 210, so for the 105, and so this has actually gone up a little bit, which is what you would expect to happen. So I didn't have time to adjust for the newer versions, but that's really interesting. Didn't get that one today. All right. Neuromuscular or neural control. So strength gains cannot occur without neural adaptations via plasticity. So strength gains can occur without the muscles getting bigger, so without hypertrophy there. Strength gain is property of the motor system, not just the muscle. That's important for you to know as an exercise professional. Essential elements include motor unit recruitment, stimulation frequency. Those are probably the main ones. I usually talk about motor unit, so getting more muscle fibers. Stimulation frequency, because your body gets used to doing it quicker. So that's the ones where they can jump higher, jump quicker. And then other neurological factors can be a part of that. So motor units are normally recruited asynchronously. So you're not thinking about it, and they don't necessarily do it exactly at the same time. But synchronicity, the more synchronous that your body recruits the muscle fibers together, the more strength gains you get. So that's going to improve everything, your force development, the forceful contractions. Resistance training is usually going to cause more synchronous recruitment of those muscle fibers. Strength gains may also reduce from motor recruitment, say the neural drive, the frequency of that neural discharge, and lowering of the inhibitory impulses. I love my mother, but she's not good at pushing past any minor pain in her muscles. She can curl, like if she's doing weight training, if it hurts even the tiniest bit, she's like, nope, ow, 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 ow. And I'm like, you've got to be able to push past a little bit of muscle pain. Like if it's a joint pain or something, like she's got bad knees from a horse accident when she was a teenager, and she's 60 years old now and still has knee problems. Probably should have had that fixed, 40 years ago. But that one I can understand. Like the knees don't have any cartilage left in between them, so when she does stuff on her knees, it hurts. But when she's trying to do just like shoulder lifts or curls, I'm like, fight past the pain there and you'll get stronger. So like if it's a muscle thing, that's where I probably tend to push her a little harder, whereas when it's something else. But that would be like the inhibitory impulses, because your body, when you push, is going to be like, that kind of hurts, maybe you should stop. But those will lower down the more you do resistance training. And I have seen her, she's doing a whole lot better now. Since my daughter was born, we've been tricking her, kind of. I was like, well, I mean, if you do 30 minutes of exercise, then I'll send you pictures of the grandkids. And it's worked. I did it as a joke the first time, and now she exercises probably 6 days a week. Like 3 days a week she goes to physical therapy, and then the off days she's exercising, and she'll type me a text, 30 minutes on the new step or 30 minutes of weights. I'm like, sweet. I literally go through my phone like, what pictures did we take of the grandkids today? And I just send them all to her to reward her for, I'm like, it's working. That would be a fascinating one for sports psychology class, to examine that one for different motivations for people. So limit evidence suggesting that, so motor unit coding. So there's limited evidence to suggest that rate coding increases with resistance training, especially the rapid movement ballistic style training. So we just don't know if doing resistance training is going to necessarily by itself make you jump higher or run faster. It's not hurting it, but it's hard to really know, because it's not really the most ethical way of taking biopsies of muscles to look at it. It is done a little bit, but like not on a massive scale. So that's why I say there's not a ton of things there. So the autogenic inhibition, so that's where your normal inhibitory mechanisms, the one we know the most about is the Golgi tendon or Golgi tendon. That's the one when, if you're, let's say I'm using the bicep today. So as that goes down and you get to the point where it gets too far, and that's where your body goes, ah, that's too much. Or as you were pulling it up there, and you got to the point where your muscles are just like, nope, not happening. It hurts. One of the things that's telling your body to not go any farther is the Golgi tendon. So that is it. So it inhibits the contraction if the tension gets too high on the muscle, and this is to your body's way of preventing the bones and tendons of getting ripped. Generally speaking, it doesn't want them to go too far, so like it's on the overstretch is where that Golgi tendon is going to tell it that. And so, as we were saying, the inhibitory forces of something like the Golgi tendons and other ones are going to go down the more you train. And they also think, have you ever seen a video, and I probably should have a video in this PowerPoint, where a person like lifts up a car to get it off of a kid? Like a parent like lifts a car up. I mean, that car weighs 2,000 pounds. And you would think like that shouldn't happen. So like that would be the inhibitory forces of your body that normally would say you shouldn't be able to lift this. When the adrenaline gets up because your parent is, your kid's trapped under a car and they lift a 2,000 pound car and you're just like, wow. Well, it's because one of the explanations could be that the inhibitory forces in the body are being overridden because they're trying to save their kid. So I'm not saying it always happens, but I've definitely seen videos of parents lifting cars up. I saw one that was a helicopter. That one's kind of a weird one. Like a helicopter crash, and they were lifting it off of a kid. That kind of thing. But that's one way that you can explain superhuman strength at times. And then there are other ones, the co-activation of the antagonist and antagonist muscles. So antagonist would be as you're doing a bicep curl, the antagonist would be the bicep, the agonist is the one, and the antagonist would be the tricep going down. But reducing that co-activation also may be an explanation for why you gain strength. And then the morphing of the neuromuscular junction at the beginning here, where we talked about calcium being released into the body, into the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and telling that, going across the synapses, all those things, like all the way down at that cellular level, all that morphs a little bit to allow you to recruit more muscle fibers. So there's a lot of factors that kind of go into this. Take a standing break. I forgot to take this downstairs after class. We'll put it up here just so I don't forget. All right, so the one we think about the most often is hypertrophy. So gaining muscle mass. So that would be the definition of hypertrophy, is increase in muscle size. They have transient hypertrophy, so that would be right after an exercise bout. So we've all the guys have done this. After you finish lifting weights, you walk up to the mirror, usually in the gym, and you do this whole like, because it looks bigger. Spoiler alert, it's not because the muscles actually gotten bigger in just the time that you exercise. It's actually edema, which is just fluid getting into the muscle to make it look bigger. Spoiler alert. That's why it goes away within like 20 minutes to an hour afterwards. So it just looks like you're bigger for a few hours maybe. But it takes a long-term thing that would be transient hypertrophy. Is just there's more fluid in the muscle. What you want is chronic hypertrophy, which would be the long term, and that's where there's actually a change in the structural of the muscle. The fiber hypertrophy, fiber hyperplasia, we'll talk about that more, or maybe both. So does the fiber get bigger, or does it split into more fibers? That's the question that we're still trying to answer. So here's the microscopic view of a person on the left here. This would be someone who has not trained for 2 years. So this is what a cross-section of his muscle fiber looked like. And then the second one is after he completed 6 months of, they call it dynamic strength training. Notice the significantly larger fibers, like the individual fiber size, has increased, and that's after 6 months of training. I mean, some of those are, those are like twice as big, maybe. And I'm assuming that is at the same amount of zoom and everything in there too. So that's one that we can see, at least microscopically, and obviously you can see somebody that's been training for a while, how much larger their shoulders are than someone else is. So what you're hoping for is chronic muscle hypertrophy. So you want to get this, you want to maximize by high velocity, eccentric training that's going to disrupt the sarcomere Z lines and then make the proteins have to remodel the muscle fibers, preferably bigger now the next time so that they're used to it. So concentric training may limit hypertrophy and strength gain. So just like only going one direction and just kind of letting it flop down is not going to gain you muscle. So when I'm doing my bicep curls and I want my biceps to get as big as possible, I want to go up and then I want to slowly let it down rather than just flip it up, flip it down, flip it up. Notice I'm also doing this horribly by using my hips to get it up. I'm not going to gain any muscle mass by doing it that way. But controlling my body to use those muscles, controlling it up, controlling it down, doing 8 to 12 reps of that is going to gain me the most muscle mass over time. Now it's going to take 6 months probably to do it consistently. That's one reason I loved my 18-week semester weight training classes. I gained 10 pounds of muscle because we got past the neural recruitment stage and started actually getting hypertrophy. So stimulating intensities as low as 30% of your 1 rep max can cause hypertrophy. Takes a little while, obviously, caused by both high rep low load and low rep high load training. So you don't necessarily have to lift massive weights in order to get bigger muscles. So other things that happen when you have hypertrophy is you're going to have more myofibrils. You're going to get more actin and myosin filaments. There's going to be more sarcoplasms and more connective tissue. And all those are going to happen as the muscle deteriorates as you exercise. And then as your body recovers and your muscles recover, they rebuild them back, the proteins in the individual muscle fibers. So muscle protein content's always going up and down. So during exercise, the proteins are going to go down and the degradation is going to go up because you're tearing muscle fibers as you're exercising. But on the other hand, after exercise, synthesis goes up and you're going to be healing them rather than ripping them apart. That's why a lot of people that are trying to get lots of fiber or lots of hypertrophy eat a whole bunch of protein, or you drink protein shakes. There's entire walls at fitness places that are all different protein supplements and shakes. And it's all because they want there to be more protein in their system to build the muscles up bigger and yeah. So hormones that can kind of help with this. So fiber hypertrophy is facilitated by testosterone. Sorry, ladies, that's just how it is. Not that women can't gain muscle mass, they just don't have the same hormone to build it as quick as guys do. So it is called a natural anabolic steroid hormone. So there are synthetic versions of this that will increase muscle mass, and we'll talk. There's a whole day on anabolic steroids, so we'll come back to that another day. Other ones that your body has is growth hormone. There's insulin growth factor 1. And then the post-level exercises levels are not required for anabolism and strength. So you don't have to try to take a supplement to increase these. Your body will naturally do that. So here's the most interesting one, I think. So the question of hyperplasia. So when your body breaks down the muscle when you exercise by doing weight training, as it rebuilds, does it actually split into new fibers, or does the individual fiber get bigger? is the question we've not really done. So in cats, they did have a study that they showed that there were more fibers, and they actually increased strength training produced, they called it fiber splitting. So rather than there being 4 fibers, when it rebuilt, there were 8 fibers. Now, the other hand, on chickens, mats, and rice, they produced only fiber hypertrophy, as in the individual fibers just got bigger rather than splitting into new ones. So the difference might be due to training regimens. They're going to need to do more studies on it, but it's also not really the most ethical thing to be doing anymore. So we're kind of in a holding pattern on whether we should continue doing that. So here is what they did to have heavy resistance training in cats. So they had them in a cage or a box, and as they pulled this lever that weighed a certain weight, it would then tell food to come down into the food bowl. And so they were testing if the cat is pushing it sideways, are they going to get more muscle fibers in that arm or in that limb is what they were testing. So interesting study. Yeah, I haven't actually read that study. That would be fascinating for another thing if you were interested in that. Hint, hint, wink, wink for Monday. So in humans, though, most hypertrophy is due to individual fibers getting bigger. Hyperplasia could contribute. We're just not sure. But so fiber hypertrophy versus hyperplasia may depend on the type of resistance training or the kind of load. They're wondering if higher intensity causes fiber hypertrophy, is where we're going there. So fiber hyperplasia, splitting, may occur only in certain individuals and under certain conditions, is the hypothesis that's being tested. So can it occur? Probably, but most likely it could occur in like satellite cells, so stem cells involved in the skeletal muscle injury, and it could be activated by stretches or injuries. But after activation, it might proliferate, fuse, migrate those satellite cells in there. So this is what they're saying here is, actually we have a video.
An illustration of a resting myofiber. It has a purple ball-like structure labeled quiescent satellite cell on top, and another structure labeled ionic clay attached to the bottom of the myofiber.
Chronic hypertrophy results from an increase in the size of existing individual muscle fibers, known as fiber hypertrophy, and may in some cases involve an increase in the number of muscle fibers, or fiber hyperplasia. Satellite cells, which are the myogenic stem cells involved in skeletal muscle regeneration, are part of this process. These cells are typically activated by the stretching and injury to the muscle that can result from intense training.
Text 1. Satellite cell activation and proliferation. A group of satellite cells activated by muscle injury appears to the left of the myofiber. A red arrow points to the label muscle injury. A black dotted line points back to the resting myofiber with the label self-renewal.
In response to muscle injury, satellite cells become activated and proliferate in the damaged region.
2. Chemotaxis to injured fiber. Illustration. A satellite cell hovers over an injured fiber.
Then fuse to existing myofibers, causing hypertrophy.
Text 3. Fusion to damaged myofiber. Hypertrophy. 2 satellite cells fuse to the myofiber. 4. Alignment and fusion to produce new myofibers. Hyperplasia.
If hyperplasia occurs, it is most likely through satellite cells combining and fusing to produce new myofibers.
5. Regenerated myofiber with central nuclei.
Satellite cells provide additional nuclei within muscle fibers. The added genetic machinery, DNA, is necessary to provide the increased muscle protein content and related materials to facilitate hypertrophy and, theoretically, hyperplasia.
So that's the concept that they're kind of wondering is if they can actually, those satellite cells can repair and maybe possibly make more muscle fibers. All right, so as I say, the neural activation and hypertrophy together. So in the short term, you're going to get a substantial 1 rep max increase due to the voluntary neural activation. And that happens those neural factors happen mostly in that first 8 to 10 week range. Long-term muscle strength gains have a much higher significance hypertrophy. So more protein synthesis, and that's hypertrophy becomes a major factor after 10 weeks. That's why my 10-week weight training class doesn't really get a whole lot of bigger muscles out of my students. And that's why my 18-week class, when I was in college for a semester, I actually gained muscle mass. Where I don't hear a lot of my students saying like I've gained so much weight taking this class. They usually say I've lost weight in weight training class because they probably weren't exercising much, and so their bodies, as it's repairing itself, using up more calories, and so they're probably losing a little bit of weight rather than gaining a whole bunch of muscle mass. So as you atrophy, we already kind of talked about this, reduction or cessation, stopping of an activity, are a major change in muscle structure and fiber. So the easiest way to see this is if somebody like breaks an arm or breaks their leg. And when they take the cast off, you look at, how much did that limb change shape? When I broke my ankle, I needed way more than that. But they put me in a cast for 6 weeks. Then they, that didn't work. So they put me in a boot and let me put some weight on it. They really should have put me in some physical therapy after 2 months of being off of it, because after 2 months, there was a significant difference in the size of my calf of my left leg to my right leg. I actually I was waiting to actually have ankle surgery in a boot all the time, and I went through my son's birth in a boot. So I'm in the hospital supporting my wife as my son's being born with a boot on my left leg and wearing a mask because it was COVID. It's really awkward. But it's just interesting that I could see that in 2 months that there was a big difference between the casted leg and the non-casted leg, and just in the size of my calf. And they've done some studies where they're detraining people on purpose for different amounts of training or not. So immobilization, so major changes can actually happen in 6 hours. That's another reason why we're worried about people in general people sit too long during the day, especially in an office setting. So if someone's going to sit for 8 hours a day and they only get up twice the whole time. So major changes can happen to your muscles after 6 hours. So lack of muscle use is going to reduce protein synthesis, and it's going to initiate the process of muscle atrophy. So, that wouldn't be the best thing to do if you're sitting for 6 hours plus a day, that your body actually is starting to go into atrophy mode because you're sitting so long. So after the first week, you could lose 3 to 4% per day. You're going to lose muscle size, so atrophy. So we had hypertrophy and now atrophy. And the neuromuscular activity goes down. So we're not recruiting as many muscle fibers. It's going to reverse the effects of type 1 and type 2 fibers, so those cross-sectional areas, as the cells are going to degenerate, and type 1 are going to be affected more than type 2. So that's going into any detraining is going to lead to a lowering your 1 rep max. Lost strength can be regained. Takes about 6 weeks. A new 1 rep match, usually though, after you've detrained, will actually exceed the old 1 rep max. So that's kind of an interesting way that our body recovers there. Once your training goals are met, then you end up getting into more of a maintenance program that just prevents detraining. So when you work really hard to get ready for a season in whatever sport you're doing, or whatever meet, if you're a strength trainer going for the Olympic weightlifting. Whenever that meet happens, then you've met your training goal. So now you are going to change your lifting habits so that you don't detrain, because you've kind of peaked at that point, and so now you're just going to try to do more of a maintenance kind of thing. So you're not going to be training nearly as often. You're not going to be probably doing as many 1 rep max, but you just don't want to stop training is the biggest thing. So this would be the changes in the cross-sectional area of major fiber types with resistance training in women over periods of post-20, pre-6, post-6. So this is the type of fibers they had in the first, before 20 weeks of training, post-20 20 weeks, before. I'm not quite 100% sure what this one is. But let's take another standing break because we got another 10 slides. 10 slides and I got 12 minutes. Woohoo! All right, home stretch of the day. Fibers, fiber alternations. So training regimens may not outright change the fiber type. It would be cool if you could purposely make you have more of the fast twitch fibers than the slow twitch fibers. But more likely is a fiber type 2 fibers are going to become more oxidative with aerobic training. We'll go into that more tomorrow on our next lecture. Type 2 or type 1 fibers will become more anaerobic with anaerobic training. So you can't outright train it, but you can make them better towards their opposite. So your fast twitch fibers are going to do better with aerobic, and then your slow twitch fibers are going to be more used to be working without oxygen. So fiber type conversion is possible if there's cross intervention, some low frequency stimulation, and high intensity treadmill or high intensity weight training. So it is possible to convert them. It just takes a lot more effort to do it. And you can only convert 10 or 15% of your muscle fibers. Now, type 2 to X to type 2A is a pretty common thing to have happen. So they become a little more powerful. It's probably the easiest way to say it. So a 20-week resistance training program. The static strength and the cross-sectional area went up. The percentage of type X goes down. Type 2A goes up. Other studies tried to have a type 1 to type 2 with high-intensity resistant work and short interval speed work. One of the guys that I've been in contact with, he teaches at Point Loma University. He's got his doctorate in exercise science, and he teaches exercise science and biomechanics there. And I have a Lodi student. Adam Gates is taking classes from him, if you remember, Caleb. He's at Point. He's taken them. So I've emailed with this guy a couple of times. But what his goal in his own training is to be able to run a sub 40-minute mile or a 4-minute mile and lift, I think it was a squat or a bench press of, I think it's squats of over 500 pounds. So he's trying to do multiple things at the same time. Usually you try to run a 4-minute mile and not gain a whole bunch of extra muscle. So he's trying to lift a very high amount with his legs and be able to run fast on the same day. I don't know if I need to email him and see if he actually accomplished his goal, because he put it up on YouTube as a thing that he was going to do, and I don't know if he actually accomplished it, or I just need to text Adam and see if he knows. That would be another way to figure it out. So the interactions between training and diet, that's always a major question, is how much should you consume after you exercise in order to regain the muscle that you have broken down? So we know that resistance training increases protein synthesis, specifically in your muscles. So we need to consume 20 to 25 grams of protein after resistance. You could also call that 1.6 to 1.7 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. I know we don't think in kilograms very often in the United States here. So you'd actually have to know what your weight is in kilograms to be able to come up with that. The only reason I know is because my doctor checkups are always in kilograms. So I know I weigh 131 kilograms. And so I could probably come up with that number without too much trouble. So the best way to probably do it actually is small doses every 2 to 3 hours to try to get the most protein synthesis. Larger doses are recommended right after, but it's not that much. I mean, you're going from a 20 grams to 25 grams. Keep on going here. So Your repeated muscle stretching is going to bring that insulin growth factor 1, and then the mTOR is another one of our messenger RNA things. I forget what that one stands for off the top of my head here. But that's going to work with the insulin and the growth factors and the protein amino acids. They're going to dictate what the messenger RNAs do. That's the same kind of thing they used to cure COVID. It's the messenger RNA. That's going to stimulate by insulin, and then those amino acids are going to convert into protein as the messenger RNA tell them to fix it. That's the easiest way to say it. Here's what that looks like on a chart. So after you have resistance trained, the muscle stretch or mechanical stretches, and then all these intracellular muscular or signals say, these three things together tell the body to have more protein to fix it, and then that's going to create larger muscles. I know it's a very simple way of putting it there. Here's what that would look like in another kind of chart here. And this is why that mTOR is so important. So the skeletal muscles need more protein. So as they open the floodgates back and forth across the cell membrane, insulin is going to shoot over to this mTOR, and that's going to have some positive ions and leucines, and that's going to tell the messenger RNAs to create more skeletal muscle. And we probably have time to listen to this guy, so we'll have a couple more minutes here.
Our skeletal muscle tissue is dynamic. It's constantly being built up and broken down. And in order to maintain our skeletal muscle tissue, we need two things, two anabolic stimuli that we encounter every day. That's physical activity and it's nutrition. And especially dietary protein is important because it actually stimulates muscle protein synthesis. So we need a combination of those to build and maintain muscle tissue. The interesting thing is when you combine physical activity and dietary protein, you get a synergistic response. So if you ingest protein after an exercise session, you get a further increase in muscle protein synthesis, and you get net muscle accretion, so you build muscle. So in the long run, if you do exercise training over a long period of time, supplementing extra protein or eating a high protein diet will actually help you gain more muscle and more strength during prolonged resistance type exercise training.
All right, so I was mentioned earlier, is should you do resistance training with children? Yes, you can do it with training. It is not unsafe, but you do need to have safeguards to do it. Children can gain strength and muscle mass. It doesn't work as quickly because they don't have the estrogen in their system and they don't have the testosterone in their system. So what you're really working on with children is technique. Can they do the lifts with proper technique so that they can gain a little bit of strength and all their strength gain is going to be from muscle fiber recruitment. They're not going to have very much muscle gain and muscle hypertrophy. Elderly people very much can make a huge difference. I have a whole thing this quarter in my weight training class that they're going to have to read and take a quiz on, about a study where they took 90-year-old monks who had not been active, and they wanted to see, could a 90-year-old person how much strength can they gain in 6 weeks, and then in 6 months, I think is what it was. And it was pretty amazing how much a 90-year-old man could increase in strength. So yes, it is actually better for elderly to do more weight training exercises than it is to do cardio. It would be better for them to spend, like in my weight training class, I'm like, if you want to do a 20-minute warm-up and a 40-minute weight training, awesome. For an elderly person, I would probably make that even more. Like, it is better for them to do like 5 minutes of walking and 55 minutes of strength training is going to keep them going longer, and they're going to have a better quality of life. Their bones are going to be stronger because you're putting load on them, so the bones will have to react to that as well as the muscles. And that's going to hopefully prevent them from having falls, which then they get atrophy from sitting in the hospital for too long and that kind of thing. So there's no differences on the neural adaptation between sex or race, so male, female, or race the older they get. So the same response in younger people, but it's just blunted is what they call it, so it's shorter. They might need up to 50 grams of protein to stimulate that muscle growth. And then training is not worth it beyond the basic strength and power of each chosen sport. So like you're not going to try to put a thing against a wall for volleyball and try to do kind of resistance training on that specific motion. It'd be better just to do the general bench press kind of motions, shoulder press. It's going to get the same amount of effect on that person's serve as trying to do a specific sport-specific motion to try to build strength and power. Strengthen the entire body, the core, and everything is better than that. Also, it costs you a lot of time to try to set up things like that. You'd just be better off doing it the other way around. And that's all I have for today. Have a wonderful day. Go to